So once again, good evening to all. And this evening, we are going to be looking at our health as we always do, but we may speak of our health in different contexts and understand it in different ways. Because when we speak about health in our sessions, it's always beyond how our body feels and how our body functions. And what I can say is that I know is true, and I'm sure you all will relate with it, is that we are living in a world that's changing very fast. We are living in a time where it appears as though life is moving so fast, and sometimes it seems like we are unable to keep up with it. I don't think there's ever been a time in our history where we have had access to more resources, more technology, more know-how, more knowledge that will enable us to live well and truly live our best life. But I find it's also very sad that that is not the reality that most of us are experiencing. And I have a particular passion about that. My passion has always been human well-being, and especially after my 25 years of clinical practice, which I retired from 5 years ago. And in the last 5 years, it has become even more so of a passion for me to see human well-being improved. And so when I look around today and I see that we're living in a time when we all should be able to experience far better lives, and that in fact it seems like the opposite is happening, is why we do this every Sunday, why we come together and share information that could impact your lives. It's also why our workshops that we do to help empower and help to lift people up, um, that we do from time to time, is also why I am so engaged in that. So let's just get into this evening's presentation, and I'm going to share my screen right now so we can get going. Okay. This evening, our topic is Restore Your Health, Awaken Your Life. For those of you who don't know me, my name is David Homer. I have been in the practice of naturopathic medicine for 25 years, up until my retirement from clinical practice 5 years ago. I'm still very much involved in the arena, just from a different perspective. Um, and I continue to work with people in deeper aspects of well-being. And a fitting place to begin is looking at a holistic definition of what health really is, and it's been slightly adapted from the World Health Organization's definition. And it says that health is a state of complete physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and financial well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. And I just want to emphasize that what it's not. It is not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And it's important that if we are indeed going to live our best life, and that's really what we really want to focus on, we really need to broaden our perspective and understanding of health beyond what has been traditionally taught to us in how we perceive health, that it's about how we feel and how our body functions. And as long as we're not feeling sick and we have no symptoms that ail us in our bodies, our mindset is that we are well and that we are healthy. And that is not necessarily true. In fact, we have to be careful with that type of thinking, because when we think that we are healthy because our body has no symptoms, it can easily prevent us from engaging in the lifestyles that we really ought to, where we can actually live a disease-free life. And so Health is not what it's not. We have to think about what is present, not what is absent. And it is a complete state. Health is not a feeling, it is a state of being. And that state of being is complete. It encompasses every dimension of our lives, everything to do with our physical well being. Yes, it has to do with all the physical aspects of our diet, nutrition, exercise, rest, and all the physical factors, but more so the mental and emotional factors as well, which gets very little attention in our day to day living. The spiritual dimension of our lives, which is really the core essence of our being, rarely gets attention at all in terms of the context of the quality of our day to day living. Our social well being, how we interact, when we look around the world today, we can see how there is more social polarizations, there's more relational conflicts that's going on today, and even financial. Each or one of these areas, every area of our lives, we are seeing more and more on a worldwide scale how more and more people are struggling. Health, a truly healthy life, is a prosperous life. And there is no getting away from that. We just may not understand all how it all comes together to provide that, and that becomes more and more apparent the more we attend and the more we go through our sessions. But let us begin for this evening to broaden our conceptual understanding that health is way beyond how we feel in our body and how our body functions, that health is indeed our entire life. And so if we restore our health, to restore our health is really to awaken our lives. And when I say awaken, I mean we want to come to a place where we are living more intentionally, more consciously, more mindfully, where we are going about life with direction, with purpose, and with meaning, where life has taken on a sense of value and worth for us, that we enjoy the journey of our day to day living. So we want to awaken our life to where life becomes an enriching experience, because each one of us, we possess all that we need. We possess every resource possible within us to live such an extraordinary life. And so it really rests on my heart when in my research and in my day to day work that I do, and I see the statistics of what's happening around the world, when I know that we can all do better. This evening, we're also going to be talking about a simple pattern that is shaping the future of mind body wellness. And why this is important is because this simple pattern interfaces and connects with every dimension of health, understanding health in its context of wholeness. So, every aspect that we just looked at, this simple pattern enables us to be able to harness that. And that makes it one of the most profound discoveries that has ever been made in the area of health and wellness for optimizing human well being. And so, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, to really understand the profundity and the power that this have to impact our human well-being and help us to transform our lives into living more extraordinarily. We have to get a better understanding of health in its broader context. And so let us begin by looking at that. When we understand that health is wholeness and that we are meant, it is our birthright to live a fruitful and to live and thrive in life naturally. But to live truly healthy, it means that we must have self governance over our well being. We must have self governance over our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and even our financial well being. We have the capacity to do that. We just may not completely understand all the elements of it. However, We also need to be aware that because health is wholeness, our whole life, when one dimension of our life goes out of order, it creates ripples of imbalance throughout every other area of our lives. And so I'm emphasizing this because when there's something wrong with our physical well being, there's professionals that we go to for that. We may go to doctors, etc. When it's mental and emotional, there are therapists or counselors we may go to. When it's spiritual, there's also a different set of professionals, and so on. And so we have fractured it, and there's no area that functions separate from the other. But we treat it that way. Even in healthcare and in medicine, we fracture everything. If there's something wrong with your heart, something is wrong with your bones, something is wrong with your liver, there is a specialist for each area. When we are fully well aware that no single area in our body can function independently of itself and that it must necessarily interconnect with every other system. So if one system goes out of balance, it also impacts the other systems. So think of our health as our life, because it does encompass every dimension. Think of it as a wheel that has six spokes. We know that if one spoke was to break, if one spoke became dysfunctional, the wheel will start to wobble. And so that's the way it is with our life. If one aspect of our life goes out of balance, you can be sure it is going to ripple through every other area of our life. But self governance, where we can live more intentionally, more focused, and with more meaning in what we are doing, that self governance is really rooted in an awakened identity. You see, when we can truly know who we are, then we will know what we are capable of, and that really unlocks our potential. And once we can know what we are capable of, our potential, it gives insight to our purpose and our drive for life. It is also unfortunate that the statistics, and I really would encourage you to look it up. The statistics, and I'm talking on a global, on a worldwide scale, show that as much as 80% of people today, of adults, are unclear about a life purpose and where they're going. These are Gallup polls and other statistics in psychology and other institutions. Most people live not recognizing what their true potential is. And part of it is connected to our sense of identity and who we are or who we think we are. But for us to reign in life, we need a mindset that's rooted in a sense of self that is governed by self love, truth, and is anchored in divine order, because at our very core, we are indeed spiritual beings. And this is the foundation upon which it must rest. That is a topic for another time. But understand that the wholeness of our health, and if we want to truly live our best life, that it must happen holistically, because every area is inseparable from every other area. So to improve one is also to improve the others. So when we look at our physical well-being, which is perhaps the biggest pandemic of all the six spokes, the World Health Organization calls it the global burden of disease, where 75% of the deaths on this planet is by chronic lifestyle disease. Over 50 million people a year are dying from chronic lifestyle disease. And so if we can begin to harness the principles that deals with that, then inevitably it is going to help us to be able to improve our lives in other aspects. And so because of this position, we live what I call fractured lives, and we want to look at breaking this cycle of fractured living. And this is just an outline of how it happens. You see, globally, humanity wrestles with persistent challenges. And if we step back and take a look at it, and all the statistics are there, we would see that rising disease, chronic stress, fractured relationships, financial strain, addictions, and a deepening disconnection from self and purpose in life. These are things that humanity is wrestling with more today than ever before. Can you believe that? at a time when we have more resources and technology that we could actually be living better. But despite these advances in technology, in medicine, in personal growth and development, in access to knowledge, these rates of chronic illness and struggles in life, they continue to climb. Ladies and gentlemen, why is this so? We have become entrapped in a cycle of survival. Today, people are living in survival mode more than ever before, and it's driving these statistics up further and further. Our brains adapt to this mode of survival because our brain will always wire itself to what we are habitually doing. Inadvertently, our ability to live effectively, to thrive, and to live our best becomes undermined. This shows up as chronic health problems, uncertain decisions, strained relationships, financial struggles, and an ongoing pattern of self sabotage. What I mean, self sabotage is things like procrastination, lack of discipline, limiting mindsets. Um, we have this way, this perspective of life, and a way of looking of how we've been conditioned to see ourselves and the world and interpret the world around us. And we develop habits and patterns of living that we want to do better. We want to feel better. We want to experience a better life. We have intentions, we make resolutions, and we keep falling back into cycles. And I think you're very clear about what I'm saying. We all go through it. I can't tell you how many times throughout my 25 years in the clinic and the hundreds and hundreds of people that have started out on healthy lifestyle journeys in order to turn around their physical wellness, and they start off well only to default back to old patterns of living. And when you would say, why do you think that you would default back? We struggle to even understand why. And so for most people, it takes a crisis. It takes a crisis, it takes a diagnosis, it takes a calamity, it takes a tragedy, it takes something in life for us to step back and become more aware of how we are living. And it all has to do with how our minds and the operating system of the mind, which is the brain, how it adapts to this, and we don't break that cycle. And so when it comes to healthcare, we focus on symptom control and disease management. And we overlook the root causes of these conditions that is formed by brain adaptation. Neuroscience tells us that there is no system in the body, organ, or no physiological function that becomes dysregulated without first the brain, which is the operating system of the entire body via the mind, that must first become dysfunctional, out of balance, or out of coordination in some way before the body is affected. So the brain wires itself to these patterns of living. And so we have this approach in healthcare that we are only addressing the symptoms and not the cause. And the cause is always in the wiring, the habitual patterns that have been encoded into the brain. When it comes to self-help and motivation, when it comes to wanting to better ourselves, we go through practices, we read books, we attend workshops, we attend seminars, and these things are indeed uplifting, they are indeed motivating, they can inspire us, but it seldom reshapes the underlying neural program that defines our self-defeating behavior. I'm trying to get us to broaden and take a look in the mirror and say, you know what? I can indeed change all of this. And so when it comes to therapy and life coaching has become, it has exploded across the internet. Everyone wants to be a life coach today. And indeed, it is helpful, but the progress in terms of personal transformation, for us to become the people that can experience the lives that we are capable of, that progress is usually slow when the brain stays trapped in its cycles of stress and it undermines transformation. You see, many of us fall back into these cycles of fractured living because the brain's wiring remains unchanged. When our approaches, on whatever level it may be, in whatever area of life it may be, when our approaches fall short of addressing the mind's operating system, we will keep defaulting back. How many of us have determined that we are going to get up and we are going to do things differently, whether it be to improve our character, to improve our relationships, to improve our health? And we start off with good intentions and we default back. How many times have we done that? How many times have we said things, done things that we vowed we will never do again and have gone back and done it? It is because it is encoded, it's wired in. And so making affirmations don't necessarily help. While it's a useful part of the process, if we don't rewire the operating system from what it has been encoded and ingrained and what defines its function, we keep going in cycles. And so that is something that is really very important. And so, so mindset is indeed everything. I call this the scepter by which we rule life. Mindset is that mental orientation that acts as the filter through which our perception of reality is shaped. This is very, very important for us to look because we go through life every day, a lot of us unconsciously or not mindful enough. Some of us even sleepwalk through life, just existing from day to day without any real focus and direction because many of us lack that drive that is orchestrated by a life purpose. And so perception of reality is so critical because how we respond to life and how life impacts us and whether we are experiencing a miserable life or whether we are experiencing a joyful life, an exhilarating life has everything to do with perception. And that perception of reality is shaped by how our mindsets are oriented, and that has everything to do, again, with our sense of how we see ourselves. It is shaped through social conditioning, personal beliefs, emotional experiences, and habitual patterns and routines that's rooted in how we perceive ourselves. That also is another conversation. We've talked about that in previous sessions on Sundays, but that's one that's worth going deeper into. Our mindset, it guides how we interpret information, experiences, our choices and decisions, and governs the habits and responses that sets the trajectory for our lives. These are our mindsets is by which you are listening to what I'm saying, agreeing or disagreeing, interpreting it how you may interpret it, how it may challenge your own thoughts and your beliefs, how you transact it in your mind is all being shaped by how your mindset has been shaped by your experiences and by your personal beliefs and how society has conditioned us, and it all has been through repetition encoded and wired into the framework of our minds. And so the good news is that mindsets are not fixed. They can be renewed. It can be rewired through inner awareness and through deliberate practice of appreciating and loving yourself is at the very core of it. And living by principles of truth that's aligned with our true sense of identity and purpose. And our sense of identity, how the world has shaped and conditioned us, that causes us to live these fractured lives, that sense of identity is what the psychologists call egocentric living, which is a false sense of identity, hence why we have these ongoing struggles in our lives. Our mind is the sovereign architect of our physical and emotional reality, and it is what gives meaning to our experience. Our day to day experience of life, whether it's enriching, uplifting, and exhilarating, whether it is heavy, whether it is miserable, whether life is a stress, whether life feels burdensome, whether life feels like it's a hardship. However, you may be experiencing life, it is completely 100% orchestrated by our minds. How we see, how we navigate life. It's all happening in this faculty that we have called mind. It's the most powerful instrument that we have. If we knew how powerful our minds were, we may acknowledge it, but if we really understood, we would spend more time cultivating our minds differently. But this is what determines, this is the architect that builds how we would experience life. And when the mind is in a peaceful place, when the brain functions more in harmony, and it enables the optimal performance of all biological systems and psychological processes, our ability for cognition, for creativity, our ability to be able to harness focus, intention, and discipline, as well as every biological function, is completely determined what state of mind we possess. When thought patterns and emotional responses are out of sync, it creates a disorder psychology calls inner dissonance or cognitive dissonance. And it causes the mind's operating system, that's the brain, to become impaired or deficient in how it's able to function. This inner dissonance, this disharmony that we live with inside, it arises out of an inner conflict between who we are and who we think we are. That's why this is such an important subject for us, which we're going to get into at another time. But this inner dissonance, our brain wires to this instability, and it becomes such a norm. We become so accustomed to it, our brain adapts to it, that this becomes our norm, that it no longer feels like it is out of order. It becomes our normal function. But it creates an inauthentic state of being, and it's characterized by what we call stress. This is important for us to really capture, because stress, we have also misinterpreted and misidentified and not defined stress, not perceive it for what it really is. And as a result, we are going about dealing with stress the same way we're going about dealing with all the other dimensions of our life, and we're coming up short on every area, including dealing with stress. And our chosen method to deal with stress today, which whether it be through therapy, through counseling, or through medication, it's also coming up short, because we're not dealing with the fundamental components and the operating system of the mind, which is what's the architect of how we experience life altogether. And this thing called stress, we want to get a better understanding of it. But the experts tell us that stress is the number one driver of physical and mental dysfunctions. And mental disorders, particularly depression, is now labeled as the number one worldwide cause of dysfunction and handicap of how people are able to function and live in life. In fact, it's even now beginning to overtake cancer. But the experts tell us that 60 to 80% of people in modern societies live in a chronic and recurring state of stress. What is this stress? This stress is an inner conflict that we have, and that will become clearer. Up to 90% of doctor visits are stress related. 75 to 90% of all human illnesses and disease, that's the basic cause, at the root of it. Over 90% of disease is caused by stress, thoughts, and beliefs. How is that possible? How does what's going on in our mind create disease? You see, we don't understand the connection between our mind and our body. They're seamlessly connected. Spirit, soul, and body, spirit, mind, and body, it's seamlessly connected as one. Just like physical, mental, spiritual, social, it's all seamlessly connected as one. Chronic stress increases our odds of developing Alzheimer's by 145%. Globally now, the experts in the medical establishment we are now spending more money, billions of dollars now every year on research for this thing called Alzheimer's. We're now spending more on this than we're spending on cancer research. Why? Because it's overtaking everything else. Why is this happening? Why is life becoming so much tougher for us? That's why this evening, this getting and really getting a handle on what we're talking about is why it is so important. You see, this identity crisis, this fracture between who we really are and who we think we are, and not being clear about that, we want to stop for a minute. And I hope that if I could encourage you with anything this evening, is that when this session is done and you sit in your quiet time or you lie in your bed tonight, reflect on your sense of self and who you think you are and how self aware you really are of who you are in terms of your worth, your value, how you see yourself. Because when you look in the mirror and you see that physical form that you're looking at in the mirror, that's not you. That's what takes you through this life. When that body is shed one day, we are still going to be aware that we exist, maybe in another dimension, but we will be consciously aware of our existence. We will just not be embodied in a human form. I'm just saying that for us to be aware that we are far more than what we see in the mirror. And that word that it deserves contemplation, because this journey of life, while it may come to an end one day, it's not about that. It is about the enriching experience and the impact that we can have in this life. And so this identity crisis, it creates this inner dissonance, which is defined as stress. Psychology and psychologists and people into that mind space, they call it the cognitive dissonance, and it's defined and it's opened up and expanded in ways, but it falls under one umbrella. We call it stress, and it leads to this fractured living that we want to break the cycle of. And it manifests this way. This is the fracturedness of it. Privately, we experience life one way. Behind closed doors, we may live another, but publicly we pretend that life is another way. We project self-confidence and we carry ourselves in certain ways, but at the same time, we are still disturbed when other people think things about us. How confident are we really? We judge others for their improper behaviors, and while we try to justify our own improper behaviors, we proclaim to value the truth yet not be honest with ourselves, and without even being aware that we're not doing it sometimes, or honest with others. We recognize the value of health, but we will willfully engage in unhealthy habits and find ways to excuse it to make it seem okay to ourselves. Fractured living. We want inner peace, but we would feel it is okay to harbor thoughts of resentment and worry. In fact, we become addicted to these because our brain wires to these behaviors. It is thinking one thing, but saying another. It's feeling one thing, but doing another. It is when our inner well-being is being defined by outer circumstances. We have to feel good about ourselves when life is going good. We have to feel good about ourselves when everything is okay, when the bills are paid, when we're being appreciated, when we're being acknowledged, when we can keep up with. We feel good about ourselves when life is in order, but when things are not going as we prefer, it flips our life upside down. Our sense of well-being is determined externally, not internally, where our sense of worth and value, our potential, and for all possibilities, our minds, our hearts, our spirit, what determines and what creates our life experience, good, bad, or indifferent, is all within. That's why it's important that we take the time to reflect on our sense of self. You see, stress does not arise from the external circumstances of life. It's not the bills, it's not the boss, it's not the traffic, it's not the finances that we're struggling to meet, it's not the relationships. It's how we are interpreted in, how we interpret it, and which gives rise to how we react to it. And it's shaped by that internal framework of our mindsets, which arises out of an unstable sense of self. You see, our identity shapes our beliefs, our mindsets, and our inner narrative, that self-talk that's always going on in our head that we pay little attention to. The very foundation from which we reign in life or suffer in life. But when identity is rooted in ego-centered living, it manifests as conflicting mindsets that inevitably creates this cycle of fractured living. So we have to be aware that no one can live beyond their sense of identity. We cannot be greater than who we see ourselves to be. And that's why we have to stop and think that, how do I really define myself? How do I really see myself? Am I where I want to be? Am I who I would like to be? With the understanding that we are capable of being extraordinary because of just who we are. And are we worth it? The fact that we exist says that we are worth it, that we are worthy of it, and we're capable of it. But this is the root of it. So how does our experience of life, how we go through day-to-day living and how we're experiencing things, how does that translate into illness? How does experience become illness? It happens through the central nervous system, which is the brain and the entire network of nerves, which is the operational bridge between our minds and our bodies. The central nervous system extends into what we call the autonomic nervous system. I'm breaking out something very complex into a simple understanding. The autonomic nervous system controls all bodily functions and it has two branches. These two branches, by the way, are consistent with our two natures, which can orient the mind. Our mind is either oriented towards egocentric living, shaped by our physical well being, our sense of self, governed by external reality, or our minds can be oriented by our inner well being, our true essence of being, our spiritual nature. But the autonomic nervous system has these two branches and is connected with our two natures, which, by the way, are meant to function like one. But when the order of life flows in its natural way from inner to out, it is perceived as one. When it flows from outside in, it becomes fractured. That's an understanding that will come in another session. But the first of these two branches is called the sympathetic nervous system. This is part of our fight, flight, freeze. This is part of the nervous system that kicks in when there's emergencies. So it's meant to engage and then settle right back down. But the sympathetic nervous system is what becomes activated and becomes dominant when there is a stress response. And it's the sympathetic nervous system, all the medical literature explains to us how every lifestyle disease we know, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, you name it, it all arises from this part of our nervous system always being in overdrive. Chronic stress promotes oxidation and chronic inflammation, and that's the seedbed for all of these conditions to spring up, to be nurtured, and to develop. It's happening to most of us, if not all of us on this call, to some degree. And it's not that it happens and you just develop a disease, it is the constant going on of it. We saw these statistics, 60 to 80% of people on the planet lives in a constant state of it. In fact, some neuroscience research suggests that even in our sleeps, this system is still in overdrive. And it's not that something is wrong with this system, we need it. The problem with it is that it is what's constantly running. And when it's constantly in overdrive, which is called survival mode, because we live in survival mode, this is always jacked up. And this is what leads us to a spiral that leads to all kind of deficiencies, weaknesses, and dysfunctions affecting our body in all types of ways. And it's coming from the mind all the way through to every system. The second branch of the autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic system, and this one deals with healing and recovery. This one becomes activated when mind and body are in their natural synergy of balance, when they're in coherence, and it arises out of inner alignment. When body, mind, and spirit are in harmonious alignment, it restores homeostasis. All the research in neuroscience shows how our immune system, cellular repair, even things like telomere lengthening, how they become upregulated in a matter of minutes, in a matter of days. This is what, if you're not familiar with the term, what they call spontaneous remission or spontaneous healing, where people with life-threatening or terminal conditions go through without any medical intervention or any specific therapy, go through a process of inner change, and these conditions just go away. Because when the parasympathetic system becomes dominant, the body repairs itself naturally of everything. The body is designed to heal. First of all, if this system is dominant, you just don't get sick. And if anything goes wrong, it is repaired and it is attended to instantaneously when this system is dominant. It just so happens that for most of us, it is not. The central nervous system is regulated by our state of mind, and our state of mind is measured by brainwave activity. So, what neuroscience has found out, has been able to determine over the years, is that when brain waves reflect inner harmony, which is defined by positive frequencies, because brain waves are measured in frequencies. So when there's things like love and joy, peace, gratitude, compassion, when it's positive states that are harmonious or unifying, the central nervous system remains in its natural balance. But when brain waves reflect inner dissonance, defined by negative frequencies, fear, worry, anxiety, guilt, resentment, etc., the central nervous system shifts into survival mode. And that's how most of us are living, which is why we have what the World Health Organization calls the global burden of disease, which is affecting every country on the planet. And if you go to their website, they expect in the coming decade that the statistics are going to get worse. Why should that happen when we're supposed to be becoming more knowledgeable, have more know-how, have better technology? You see, we're not getting to the core of it, where the very mind that's operating not just our physiology and our psychology, but it's determining how we navigate this journey called life and how enriching that experience it is. It doesn't touch that. We're just looking at quick fixes. Quick fixes, we have to get to the root of it. So when the mind is dominated by conflicting thoughts and turbulent emotions, the brainwave frequencies are distorted, creating incoherent neural functioning between the mind and the body. You see, our thoughts and our emotions in themselves are frequencies. And when they're not harmonious and they're conflicting and turbulent, it disrupts the natural harmony of the mind and therefore the brain. When the mind is tranquil, the brain's neural pathways function in synchronized coordination, optimizing the natural synergy between brain and body. So when the inherent synergy between brain and body is optimized, it orchestrates optimal biological and psychological processes and performance. Rewiring the mind starts with rewiring the brain's neural pathways for coherence, for harmony, for balance. And that's why true transformation means upgrading the mind's operating system. And so, a lot of our practices, we may have good intentions that we want to improve our lives in particular area. And we may start out with certain habits, or we want to change our habits in whatever way it might be. But if we don't do what we or engage it in such a way whereby the very wiring, the programming, the encoding that has been etched into the operating system, if that is not changed, if the mind is not renewed, meaning that if the brain is not rewired, then it's short-lived or just partial at best. And so we want to be able to live our best life. We want to be able to get to that level because that is the root where we fall short. So what's the solution? We have to synchronize brain waves to match a coherent state of mind. And it will reset the central nervous system into its natural state of balance and order. When that happens, it upregulates the natural functioning of mind-body coherence And whatever your body has going on, whatever deficiency, whatever is not working well, begins to gradually come right back into order because that's the natural state of balance. It is a state where who we are, what we believe, and how we live is one and the same. It's cultivating a truth centered way of living. Health is every dimension of our life, physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, even financially. And so when we begin to cultivate our lives and start to work on every dimension, which is what it takes, because we have to get to a point where our thinking is pure, it's free, it's harmonious, our emotions are positive, our speech is uplifting, it carries positive frequencies. Our actions are all good. It's when it's all aligned, when how we think, feel, speak, and live is one harmonious way. That's that the brain is going to be so coherent. It upregulates all the systems in your body. That is how we come back to that place of living a disease-free life. But more than that, every other area of our life, our relationships, our interactions with people, how our capacity to create the lives that we prefer, our financial position, it affects every other area of our lives positively. And so when there's this misalignment between soul and spirit, that's inner well-being, it creates a tension in the body, and that's the root of all illness. But the key to it, where we don't get to sufficiently, is the mind, which is the architect of it all, the mind's operating system, which is the brain, which governs over physiological and psychological processes. When that is out of order, we're not working at that level. And although the science is there, but it's not the approach that we take. And so this brings us to this simple pattern that I talked about. Here's my question. What if there was a way that you and I can synchronize our brain waves to match a coherent state of mind? What if we could do that because we can't suddenly snap our fingers and bring ourselves into alignment? To have our thinking and our emotional responses to life and to have our perceptions just all remodeled to a point where we are now in a state of alignment and balance. Because we can't snap our fingers and do that. And it's a process of cultivation, a process of nurturing ourselves and our well-being. And that takes time, and that's a process throughout our lives. And so, but what if there was a way that we can bring our brain waves into such coherence and balance that it resembled a state of mind that was in that place of order? And that's what brings us to this simple pattern that is shaping the future of mind-body wellness. This was discovered by this gentleman called Jay Dhaliwal. After years of research and development in neuroscience, he was able to develop what is now a brand new paradigm in drug-free wellness. It was inspired by hope, developed by compassion, because what led him to do this was trying to solve his mother's multiple sclerosis, a neurodegenerative problem that she suffered with for most of his life. He sought out to find a solution for her, and it led him to this discovery. And it's now become such a trusted and safe and effective way. But let me say this drug-free wellness, this is not an improvement over what currently exists within the healthcare model. This is not a better option to what exists. This is nothing like what exists. It's a completely new paradigm. It is a completely different approach. It is ushering in a new era of wellness. And so his vision to build something generational that would transform the world, it's very possible because this technology, as simple as it is, and as profoundly powerful as it is, because it taps into the very operating system of our lives in a way that is so natural, it can indeed help to transform this world that seems to be struggling so difficultly. And so I'm going to show you a 2-minute video where he does a brain scan demonstrating the simplicity but the effectiveness of this technology. Then I'm going to just explain that a little bit, show you what's available, and then we'll come down to a close. So let's just look at the video of the brain scans. He calls it vibrotactile technology, and it's very, very powerful.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Dallywell. I'm the CEO and founder of Vox Life and the creator of Vox Life HPT. Today, I want to talk to you about our Harmony Neuro Patch. And what this product does is actually stimulates receptors on our skin, sending a neurosignal to our brain to help it reach homeostasis. This is the only product in the world that relies on the neurohaptic system that every single one of us has to optimize our neurology and optimize our health. Today, with the help of Dr. Mark DeBrinket, our VP of Clinical Strategy, we're going to be using an FDA-cleared 19-channel EEG headset, as well as FDA-cleared software to visualize, record, and show the impact that our technology has on our neurology and our brains to help it reach optimal performance. What we want to show today is how the Harmony Neuro Patch helps that dysregulated yellow, blue, and red colors in the brain maps transform into that healthy green homeostasis neurology that is the foundation of health and wellness. So what we're looking at right now is a neurological QEEG output of Mike's limbic system. The 19 channels are reading over 60,000 brainwaves a second and generating an output of neurofunction and brainwaves. What we want to see now is where that suboptimal red and yellow colors are. We want to see them turning as much as possible to a healthy green with the application of our HPT patch. So we've applied the patch now to Mike's arm, and within 10 seconds, you're seeing that predominant yellow and red become predominantly green. Just for clarification, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing in the world that has this output at this rate of speed without drugs, without chemicals, without electricity. That's the power of Vox HPT. So when we see a healthy green neurology, what we're looking at is a brain and a mind in homeostasis. It is operating in its optimal function. And this is so important. And this is why it's so important. So Vox Life HPT, as we demonstrated with our neuro patch, helps the central nervous system reach homeostasis in our neurology. And the reason this is so important for overall wellness and health is that neurology is the top of the pyramid of our physiological health and wellness paradigm. First is neurology at the very top, then there's chemistry, then there's biology, then there's physics and mechanics. Neurology will have an impact all the way through our entire physiology. Healthy neurology, healthy body, better wellness.
And so this technology, the simplicity of it, it is complex but simple, and I'm just going to help you to understand the simplicity of this. The technology is based on Nobel Prize research that goes back into the early 1930s and 40s, when it was discovered that every cell in the human being it reflects or it emits and receives electromagnetic frequencies, vibrational frequencies. Every cell in the body, it emits, it transmits, and receives electromagnetic frequencies. That led to what we know today as MRIs and MEGs, EKGs, and even these EEGs headsets where we can now map things inside the body. Then in the early 2000s, 2 other Nobel Prize laureates discovered that there are these ion channels that's embedded in the sensory neurons in the skin. These ion channels are able to detect the vibration of anything that touches the skin. Well, we know that anything that touches the skin sends a signal to the brain, which is how we even know that anything is touching our skin, is because it sends a signal to the brain. But what they discovered is that these ion channels can actually pick up the vibration of various patterns, and each pattern has a different signal. What Superpatch has been able to do, because the brain's these brain waves are measured in hertz, their frequencies. It's like like the same as how you may tune a radio into a station. And so when our brain waves are not in harmony, when they're discordant and they're not in order, it is like a radio that's not properly tuned, and so the sound is not coming through properly. It has static. So what Superpatch has been able to do is that they have discovered various patterns that when it touches the skin, it sends a signal to the brain to bring the radio back on to proper tuning so that the signal now becomes clear and the flow, that natural flow of healing in the body just naturally takes place. And so it is almost like a tuning fork if you want to think about it that way. If you have two tuning forks and you hit one, the other one begins to resonate at the same, once is of the same pitch. So if you have, for example, the part of the brain that governs immune function, if that neural network in the brain that governs immunity, if that if the signals were out of balance, if that network was out of harmony, the immune system will not be optimal. Superpatch has created a simple technology where a simple pattern that touches the skin sends a signal like a tuning fork and just brings it back into tune. Now the immune system becomes optimal. And that's very simple. Now, our brain waves are actually retuned in other ways by other sensory perceptions that we may not even be aware of. So, someone, you might be in a state of anxiety, or you may be feeling depressed or not in a best place, and somebody can say something to you and you start to feel better and your position shifted from where you were a minute ago. That's because your brainwave shifted because of how you received what they said. Sometimes you can listen to a song that maybe from go back years, and when you hear it, you feel a certain way. Or someone can just come and you may be feeling down and somebody just come and rest a comforting hand on your shoulder. Don't say a word, just a comforting arm that says everything is going to be okay. And you start to feel better. All of that is because our brain waves are shifting. This is resetting our brain waves through the power of touch. A good way to understand it is like this. If you have a QR code has a pattern on it, and you can't tell what is embedded in there, but if you point a camera, it converts the visual pattern into a digital signal and it unlocks the information that's in the pattern. Superpatch is the same way. All it has on it is a tactile pattern. No ingredients, no drugs, no chemicals, no external frequencies. It has nothing except a tactile pattern on it. When that pattern touches the skin, the ion channels, the receptors in the skin, they detect the vibration of the pattern and sends a neural signal to the brain that synchronizes the brain waves and it resets them back to their natural balance. So the patches themselves are not really addressing any symptoms or any functions of the body which is naturally designed to be able to do that, but it wouldn't do it when everything is when things are not in balance. And anything that goes out of balance or dysfunction in your body, it first must, according to neuroscience, begin in the brain. Anything that's not functioning well in your body, it originates with the control center being out of balance. It's just that it's never really addressed in medicine. It's all symptom control. But if you can bring the operating system of the mind back into its natural harmony, it naturally will fix anything of itself. That is incredible. And so that's in essence how it works. So after 15 years of research and development, vibrotactile technology has become peer-reviewed and published as science. It's in some of the major medical journals around the world, even though it is not medicine, it is having such an impact. The technology is gaining global recognition, and Superpatch is being invited to present their groundbreaking technology at some of these global symposiums where the greatest of medical minds come together to discuss the future of healthcare and medicine. No one has ever seen before where you can just simply put a patch onto your skin, and all it has is a pattern that sends a gentle signal to your brain and it resets neural pathways back into the natural harmony so that the body systems, both physically and psychologically, becomes optimized. And so to date, Superpatch has discovered in their 15 years 14 different patterns that presents 14 different technologies that when you put these patches on, they upregulate and bring into harmony and balance the various networks of the brain and begin to reset things back into the natural order. Now, for many people, that may sound simple and it might not mean much, but this is so profoundly powerful, it is actually transformative. So they have the one that you saw demonstrated was the Liberty patches mobility. This patch is so incredible in what it does for people with mobility issues, strength, um, inflammation. It is anti-aging. You have for pain, athletic performance, for stress and anxiety, for immune system, for sleep, for mental clarity and cognition, energy, moods, enhancements, focus and concentration, for healthy skin, metabolism, habit control, for masculine performance. And what the company has in research and development now, it is absolutely incredible. The company is they're going to be they're developing things, and they're going to start with a release coming next year of things that do not exist in the arena of health and wellness right now that is profoundly powerful, all working the same way, whereby just through the power of touch, it is bringing the balance and harmony back to the mind's operating system, where the brain begins to function as though the mind is already in harmony. And it does what it naturally does. The body functions optimally, and the mind for that matter. And so these are mind body solutions that everybody needs. People are looking for drug free solutions. They don't want the side effects anymore, the contraindications, the allergic reactions. These are safe for children. If you have a toddler that has a flu, you can put on the Defend patch, which is for the immune system, and see these things begin to work almost immediately. There is no using it for a period of time to see, okay, you take a supplement and you have to take it for a few weeks, a couple of months to see how well it's working. These begin to work almost instantly. They're FDA registered. They're not FDA approved because approval is only required for things that are ingested, foods, medicines, etc. Because this puts nothing into your body. It is registered as being safe for human use, and we have a 95% positive review of how that works. And so when you combine the patches together, you have such a broader range of efficacy and mental and neurological coordination that enhances physiological function and psychological function in ways that can become very transformative. And so, through the power of touch, we're simply unlocking the potential within. And I'm saying that to say that the miracle, the magic, the power of it is really in the body because it's just tapping into what already exists by divine design. So super patches, they are safe, wearable, non-invasive tactile technology, and it's designed to optimize our brainwave patterns, supporting neuroplasticity. That's really important. Why? Because the longer we use them and the more consistently we use them, as the brain stays into this new balance, the brain begins to rewire itself to the new balance. And that is the magic. Consistent use over time, not just feeling good at the moment, that's good. But when you use them consistently over time, the brain gradually begins to rewire itself, what is called neuroplasticity. And that is where we get sustainability. It naturally delivers specific neural signals to gently guide the brain towards healthier states, more coordinated and more resilient. So it syncs with the intelligence of the body's operating system, fostering a balanced mind body synergy. There's nothing in the medical world that works like this. It creates the optimal environment for rapid neurological alignment, making mindset shifts more natural and accessible. That's why this is transformative. You see, super patches work like updating the body's operating system before we start running transformative apps. So we're trying to change this and trying to change and trying to improve, but we're not updating the operating system. And so we get short-term effects. This is very transformative to our lives. Very easy to use, peel, stick, and just live better. Each patch is effective for 24 hours because after a while, the oils in the skin, the body temperature, the heat, perspiration, the pattern begins to erode. And so being a material, it begins to break down. And so the patch, you change it every 24 hours. We have a medical and a scientific advisory board that works along with the research and development for real world application. Because of this team, we're in the near future, we're going to be hearing about sports personalities that are going to be talking about these super patches because a lot of the major sports arena, like the NFL and the NBA, that to get into those arenas, you can't get in to those type of arenas with anything unless it's been properly vetted and tested by the authorities. And about half of the NFL teams in the United States now are beginning to experiment and use super patches to optimize their athletic performance completely drug-free just by getting their brains to work better quite naturally. Wow, this is actually very, very impressive. So my um, invitation to you tonight is to enhance your own well-being. Get aligned. Start examining, looking at your life, understanding that you want to engage the process of personal change, but you want to be able to upgrade the operating system so that you can harness and you can be able to, and you want to work with the very system that's going to govern how well our minds are going to work. So we don't just want to renew the mind. Renewing the mind means that the brain, the operating system, must be rewired to new patterns of thinking, but that happens a lot easier when we upgrade the system to function more efficiently. And so we have a Facebook page, our Patch and Go community, where we have thousands of testimonies of people all over the world whose lives are being impacted by Super Patch. So if the mind is the battlefield, as they say, then Super Patch is our strategic advantage to living our best life. And so how these can become accessible to you. You probably were invited onto this call by one of our associates who can provide it to you. These are available only from Superpatch Associates, whether it be online or whether directly. They retail for $60 for a 4-week supply. Superpatch is a blue ocean business. Blue ocean business means that they're in a category all by themselves and they re-evaluate and rethink value. Unlike other businesses that will jack prices up because of uniqueness, Superpatch is not doing that because they have a vision to transform lives and make it so they've made this technology more accessible. And so what I have on the screen to the right of the screen is what we call in our team a Flex 4 Starter Pack. It has a one-time membership fee of $40 built into that 175. And for that, you can choose 4 different technologies. You get one, you pay for 3, although you get 4, so 1 is free. And that is how easily accessible this can be. There are other options besides this of how you can become part of Superpatch's Blue Ocean business, because some people may think, well, I don't necessarily want to do the business, and I don't understand why anybody wouldn't, because all the people that I work with, everybody is looking for more income, and you want to do it in a way that has meaning, has value for you and for others, and this business provides that. So you don't only have access to wholesale pricing and an easy way to access and become part of the system, you have the option to participate in a globally scalable model that works unlike most models that exist out there today. So for those who might be interested, you may want to consider that. On Monday, that is tomorrow, we do a presentation where we talk about the uniqueness of what Superpatch offers as a blue ocean business. This is part of how they are engaged in their mission to bring this technology to the world, whether it be through your own personal use and you sharing it with other people. For those of you who might be interested in attending that, you can scan this code. This code will give you the Zoom link to the business presentation. Optionally, you can speak to whoever would have invited you onto the call. They might be able to provide you with the link as well, but you can take a screenshot or you can just scan this with your phone and you can get a link, right? It's just the way how this pattern on this QR code unlocks the Zoom presentation. Super patches, the pattern on the path just unlocks a signal to retune or bring various networks in the brain or a combination of them back into the normal coordination and harmony. And what happens is the natural magic that's divinely designed, the body repairs itself. Absolutely incredible. And so I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time and coming on this evening and sharing this time with us and giving us the opportunity to share with you. So please, my encouragement to you is this. Take a time to just reflect on your life, because my weight is, and if I were to focus on anything tonight, it would not be so much this unique technology, this simple pattern that's transforming lives. I mean, in major ways. It will be to look at your life and look at where you are. If you're happy with where you are and think this fine, but if you want to live better, be better, and create, I mean, literally create the life and the future that you want for yourself, for your family, about you becoming your best self, and you will learn all about that as part of the community, then consider Superpatch as being a bridge to harnessing the mind's operating system where we can harness life from a different perspective. So, with that, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for coming on. God bless you all. You guys have a great week ahead of you. And for those of you who have an interest, perhaps we'll see some of you tomorrow evening on the call at 6:30. God bless you. Have a great evening.